You thought you were getting better. You were doing the journaling, the affirmations, the late night crying on the bathroom floor. You even made peace with the idea that healing wasn't linear. But here you are again. One message, one silence, one shift in tone, and your entire nervous system crumbles like it's day one all over again. You feel weak. But the truth is, you're not broken. You're just emotionally raw in a world that constantly demands a perfect face. You've been conditioned to believe that every feeling must be soothed instantly, every discomfort processed aloud, every chaos externalized. But there's a different approach. Forgotten one. Older than therapy, older than self-help books. A philosophy forged in the fire of empires falling and lives unraveling. It doesn't offer comfort, it offers clarity. Not control over others, but mastery over yourself. That philosophy is Stoicism, and it doesn't begin with silence. It begins with a single, disarming question. What is in your control? Not how they feel, not how they left, not whether they come back. Only this, what you do next. That question lands in your gut like a quiet anchor. Because emotional chaos has always been your storm. You were raised to manage other people's moods, to tiptoe around unspoken tension, to anticipate anger before it arrived. You became an expert at interpreting tone shifts and decoding silence, but a stranger to your own peace. So when someone ghosts you, betrays you, invalidates you, you don't just feel sadness. You feel disoriented, like the floor's been pulled out from under a choreography you rehearsed for a decade. Your instinct isn't to process, it's to perform, to fix, to earn your way back into being okay. And yet, the Stoics say, no one can make you feel anything against your will. First, that feels harsh, insensitive even, as if they're ignoring the weight of your heartbreak. But look deeper, they're not denying your pain. They're handing you the key to stop reliving it. You've been trained to believe that healing means expressing everything. But Stoicism whispers another truth. Healing often begins with what you choose not to say. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to explain your pain to someone who caused it. You don't have to post your disappointment as proof that you mattered. You can instead observe. And this is where it begins to shift. You sit with the ache. You let the chaos rise. Not to drown in it, but to study it like smoke curling from a fire you no longer feed. You realize the trigger wasn't the silence itself. It was what you attached to it. That you're unworthy, forgettable, disposable. But those are not facts. They're interpretations. And interpretations, Marcus Aurelius reminds you, are always within your power to revise. So you start asking better questions. Not why did they leave? But what belief in me did this stir? Not how do I make the pain stop? But how do I respond with dignity? You begin noticing that the real damage isn't the event. It's the meaning you assign to it. They didn't text back. That's a fact. You spiraled into worthlessness. That's a choice. A reflex, maybe, but a choice that can be unlearned. And unlearning begins with presence. You stop fighting the sadness. You sit beside it. You treat it not as an enemy, but as a messenger. It came to show you where you've outsourced your power. It came to remind you that peace isn't built on their apology. It's built on your perception. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And you know that's true. You've had entire panic attacks over conversations that never happened. You've wept over endings that were already decided. You've rehearsed rage and sorrow and closure in your head 1,000 times. And none of it changed the reality. But now, finally, you understand what Stoicism was preparing you for. Not to become emotionless, but to become unshakable. Because the Stoic doesn't deny their grief. They just refuse to be enslaved by it. They feel every loss, every betrayal, every collapse, and then they rise. Not because they're unaffected, but because they refuse to place their inner world in the hands of another. You remember that moment, 3 nights ago. You were lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easy it was for them to leave. And then the whisper came, not from anger, but from stillness. Do not argue with reality. Accept it. Then choose. That was the moment something cracked open. You didn't feel strong. You felt clear. They left. They didn't care enough. They chose not to try. That's not an indictment of your worth. That's an invitation to reclaim your energy. So you got up, not to make a declaration, not to post a quote about cutting off toxicity, but to breathe, to clean your kitchen, to fold the clothes you've been ignoring, to re-enter your body, because the Stoic doesn't need to prove anything. They just return to what they can govern. You start creating distance, not just from them, but from the belief that your pain defines you. You stop narrating your life as a tragedy. You stop performing closure. You stop needing them to understand. And instead, you begin building the most radical thing you've ever known. An inner fortress. Not a wall. Not detachment. But a clarity that says, I am still here. I still have choice. And I will not hand over my peace to someone who cannot hold it with care. You start treating your emotions as data, not destiny. You feel the wave rise, shame, longing, grief, and you breathe. You ask, is this helping me act with virtue, with wisdom, with courage? If not, you let it pass. That's what no one tells you about Stoicism. It's not about suppressing feeling, it's about strengthening response. It's about the space between the emotion and the reaction. It's about learning to pause before you spiral. It's about becoming someone who doesn't flinch when life doesn't go your way, because you've stopped expecting it to. And in that space, something ancient and still awakens inside you. A self you've always carried, buried beneath the noise. The part of you that doesn't need saving. The part that sees through the drama, the performance, the panic. The part that simply watches, and then decides. You're not fully healed, but for the first time, you're not afraid of the storm inside you. You're sitting with it, calmly. You've stopped screaming for the sky to change. You're learning to find your stillness while the thunder rumbles. And that is the beginning of freedom. Then, just as you're starting to breathe differently, life tests you. Not with some grand betrayal, but with something quieter, more subtle. Person reappears. Someone who once left without explanation. Their message is soft, disarming, wrapped in just enough warmth to stir the part of you that still aches to be seen. You freeze for a moment. There's a flutter in your chest. Not quite hope, not quite fear, just that old sensation. Maybe this time they mean it, but you've changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. So instead of rushing to reply, you listen. Not to them, but to yourself. You notice the way your breath shortens. The way your thoughts race ahead into fantasies. The way your hands itch to type something pleasing. You catch it. And that's the win. You don't have to prove you're over it. You just have to choose not to betray yourself again. Because here's what you've learned. Emotional chaos isn't just about people hurting you. It's about the ways you've repeatedly abandoned your own peace to make room for their chaos. And Stoicism, for all its quietness, demands an act of rebellion. To stop being available for your own erosion. This doesn't mean you ghost them. It doesn't mean you reply coldly. It means you decide not from emotion, not from fantasy, but from alignment. You ask, does this serve the person I am becoming? And if the answer is no, you walk away. Not with bitterness, not with drama, with composure, with stillness. Because the Stoic doesn't run from pain. They don't run toward it either. They walk beside it. They don't ask life to be different. They ask themselves to be prepared. So now you begin the work not just of healing, but of sustaining peace. You wake up and realize, your emotional life has been built on two things, reaction and rumination. The moment something goes wrong, you react. Impulsive messages, overthinking, emotional spirals. Then you ruminate. Play the scenario again and again. Narrate it to friends. Attach it to your identity. And what Stoicism offers isn't apathy, it's interruption. It's the radical decision to pause between the stimulus and the story. You feel hurt? Acknowledge it, but don't become it. You feel fear? Witness it, but don't obey it. This is the cornerstone of your transformation. Emotional distance isn't emotional denial. It's clarity. Imagine you're in a storm, and everyone around you is screaming about the thunder. But you step back, you watch the clouds, you note their direction, and you decide whether or not to take shelter. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But don't mistake this calm for passivity. In fact, Stoicism is deeply active. It teaches that virtue, living in alignment with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline, is the only true good. So when your friend vents for the fifth time about the same toxic relationship, you don't join the outrage parade. You don't tell them what they want to hear. You ask, gently, "What are you choosing?" Not to shame, but to remind. You become the calm in the chaos, not because you're unfeeling, but because you've stopped outsourcing your emotional reality to things you cannot control. And slowly, that shift bleeds into every corner of your life. You stop chasing closure, not because you no longer care, but because you realize closure isn't something others give you. It's a decision you make. You stop demanding fairness, because fairness in the Stoic sense is how you act, not how others treat you. You stop needing apologies, because your peace is no longer tied to their remorse. Instead, you become intentional. You build morning rituals, not for productivity, but for presence. You sit in silence, even just 5 minutes. You breathe. You name your top 3 values. You ask yourself, how can I live these today, no matter what happens? This is emotional armor, not to protect you from life, but to prepare you to meet it with strength. Then something strange happens. People begin to comment on your energy. You seem different. You don't get triggered like before. I feel calmer when I'm around you. And it's not that nothing affects you. It's that nothing owns you anymore. You still feel the sting of rejection, but you don't spiral. You still hear the harsh words, but you don't let them live in your body rent-free for days. You still get disappointed, but you don't craft an identity from it. And now you start attracting different people. Those who feed on drama, they drift. Those who once relied on you to co-regulate their chaos, they sense the boundary. Those who respect truth over performance, they stay. They listen. They meet you at your new level, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Because that's the final secret Stoicism teaches you. You do not change others by convincing them. You change others by being unshakably yourself. And when people can no longer manipulate your emotional weather, they either adjust or disappear. Both outcomes are gifts. You now understand. Emotional chaos isn't healed by comfort. It's healed by clarity. And clarity doesn't always feel good. First, it feels like loss, like standing alone, like being misunderstood. But beneath that discomfort is freedom. You're no longer performing resilience. You are resilient. You're no longer reacting from wounds. You're responding from values. You're no longer begging for peace. You're becoming it. And all because you chose one moment at a time, not to let your emotions rule you, but to let them inform you, shape you, sharpen you. That's the Stoic way. And it's not cold, it's courageous, because it takes courage to feel, and still not flee, to care, and still not collapse, to lose, and still not become better. You've made it this far, not because you hardened, but because you anchored. You didn't abandon your heart. You just taught it how to stand still in the storm. And that is what emotional healing looks like when you walk the Stoic path. You don't wake up one day suddenly healed. You wake up and notice you no longer take everything personally. The silence doesn't spiral you. The criticism doesn't shatter you. The ending doesn't define you. That's when you know something has changed. Not on the outside, on the inside. But here's what no one tells you about healing through Stoicism. It won't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like indifference, like you're becoming numb. You worry. Have I closed off? Am I emotionally dead? But you're not. You're detoxing. Your nervous system, once addicted to intensity, is learning how to breathe without chaos. What feels like dullness is actually peace. But peace can be unsettling when drama was your baseline. So you give yourself time. You learn to sit in the quiet, not because it's exciting, but because it's honest. And the beauty of Stoicism is that it doesn't ask you to escape life. It asks you to stand inside it, wide awake, and say, even this, I can endure. That's what it means to be truly strong. But strength in the Stoic tradition isn't stoic in the way you've been taught. It isn't about suppressing pain. It's about owning it without being owned by it. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You see now how many of your wounds came not from what happened, but from the story you told yourself about what it meant. They left. You made it mean you're unworthy. You failed. You made it mean you're broken. They changed. You made it mean love was never real. But what if? Nothing has to mean anything other than what it was. No cosmic lesson. No hidden punishment. Just life unfolding imperfectly, honestly. This is where emotional detachment begins, not as avoidance but as clarity. You stop injecting unnecessary meaning into every shift of energy. You stop needing constant reassurance to feel secure. You stop replaying old conversations trying to extract peace from them, because you realize what's meant for you won't confuse you. You no longer reach for people who stretch your worth into something conditional. Instead, you practice the ultimate Stoic discipline, letting go of things not in your control. That includes the way they feel about you. That includes the future you imagined. That includes the version of yourself you had to become just to survive. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've stopped begging life to behave the way you expected. You trust yourself now. That's the difference. You trust that even if it ends, even if it breaks, even if you lose it, you will still be whole. That trust, that's your emotional freedom. And from that place, love becomes possible again. But not the love you knew. Not the codependent, self-sacrificing, anxious kind. Quieter love. The kind where you're not chasing, you're choosing. The kind where boundaries aren't threats, they're invitations to meet in truth. The kind where someone's presence isn't your oxygen. It's a beautiful addition to a life already full. This love doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives like sunrise, slow, warm, steady, and you recognize it not because it thrills you, but because it doesn't destabilize you. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to be, because you've already done the proving to yourself. And here's the most powerful realization of all. You were never meant to be ruled by your emotions, but you were also never meant to reject them. You were meant to ride them, to observe them, to use them as messengers, not masters. That's what the Stoics got right. They didn't tell you to stop feeling. They told you to stop confusing feelings with facts. You feel fear? Okay. But that doesn't mean you're in danger. You feel jealousy? Okay. But that doesn't mean you're being replaced. You feel sadness? Okay. But that doesn't mean you've failed. Emotions are like weather, temporary, shifting, informative, but you are the sky, constant, unshaken. This shift, that you are not your emotions but the witness of them, is the final key to healing emotional chaos. From this place, you build a new way of living. You ask better questions. Not, how do I make them stay? But, why do I betray myself to keep people comfortable? Not, why did this happen to me? But, what strength is life asking me to claim now? Not, how do I get rid of this pain? But, how do I meet this pain with dignity? This is your rebirth, not as someone emotionless, but as someone emotionally sovereign. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You react less, but your presence weighs more. You need less, but your standards rise higher. And slowly, the world reflects your shift. People treat you how you treat yourself. You lose some, but you gain more. You stop being a magnet for chaos, and you become a sanctuary for calm. And no, it doesn't mean you're invincible. You'll still get shaken. Life will still surprise you. But you'll return to center faster. You'll self-correct sooner. You'll catch yourself before the spiral. That's Stoicism in practice. Not perfection, presence. And when the chaos comes again, and it will, you won't ask, why me? You'll ask, what's in my control? You'll breathe, you'll choose, and you'll walk through the storm. Not untouched, but undestroyed. That's what it means to heal, not by force, but by philosophy. That's what it means to be strong, not by pretending, but by practicing. That's what it means to be free, not because life gets easier, but because you get wiser. So when someone asks, How did you become so calm? You'll smile, because the answer isn't loud. It's built one choice at a time. If the story became a mirror for you, if you saw yourself somewhere in these words, then let this be your reminder. You're not broken, you're just remembering, and you're healing not through noise, but through quiet power. Now take a deep breath and carry the stillness into everything you touch.